Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Colonial Williamsburg's Exploring Our World series, where we try to dive into the lives and minds of our 18th century counterparts. It's the holiday season, and so today we are talking about food, eating, dining, and cooking. And we are here today with very special guest, Michael Twitty, alongside our own Harold Caldwell. My name is Stacy, and I will be your host today, but I am going to step off camera for a moment, so you won't see me the whole time, but I will be here to moderate your questions. So please post any questions that you have for Michael and Harold in the comments, and we will get to them in just a little bit. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get started by introducing our guests today. So Michael and Harold, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourselves to get started?
Sure. Hi, Stacy. Hi, everybody. I know that a lot of y'all are just like excited because you've asked me a million times, when are you going to be at Williamsburg? Well, now you know exactly where I am at the moment. And I've asked my chef brother Harold to lend me his skills and knowledge and abilities. We're trying to present to you a little taste of what we do. My name is Michael Twitty. I'm the author of The Cooking Gene, 2 times James Beard Award-winning book. And we are really here to give you a taste of early African American foodways. We are both historic interpreters who are vested and passionate about this work. And today we're making Brunswick Stew, the prototype version of Brunswick Stew from the mid to late 18th century before it became popular in the 1820s and beyond. And my apologies to those of you from North Carolina and Georgia. Today, Brunswick Stew is definitely a Virginia dish. So, I love you, sorry, but that's how it's going to be. Hate me in those comments. Now, we're also doing, just joking, we're also doing some roast pork. I know I'm a Jew, bad, but they're going to eat it. Thanks. And the other part we're going to do is some roast chickens and a puff pastry dish with, we're going to use turkey sausage. Shh, don't tell nobody. There was no 18th century turkey sausage. But I'm going to eat it, so that's how it's going to be. So we really want to give you just a little bit of flavor of things. And I want to make this present at the outset. What we are doing is not representative of everyday people's eating from day to day, nor is it representative of what enslaved people enjoyed or ate all the time. Enslavement was colloquial and discretionary, and not all people in this community were enslaved. So I really want to make that very present, that what we're doing is, there's no blanket to what we're doing, which is very specific. We also want to recognize before we begin our ancestors. We are on the land of the former Powhatan Paramount Chiefdom, and we're also in a space of the largest African American pocket community within the city of historic Williamsburg. We're in the residence of Peyton and Betty Randolph, and they had over 28 enslaved people in the city and over 100 in the country. The cook here was Miss Betty, and Miss Betty and her children, and quite frankly, I must tell you, she has watched over me every time I've cooked in this kitchen, so I show respect to her. Harold, what's up, brother?
What's happening?
What's happening? We in masks for the first time.
I had come down long ago. My name is Harold Caldwell. I am now an apprentice carpenter. Also a lead foodways, African American foodways person here at Colonial Williamsburg. And I've been here for quite some time, about 14 some odd years. And it's all about, again, showing those connections with that African, Native, and European, showing how much we are connected. And if anybody can come together, it's through food. I mean, that's one of the things that brings people together is food. And when we're talking about American cuisine, in particular Southern cuisine, we all have a connection, and we are here to show all those connections and also importantly to elevate those African Virginians, all Africans that were in these kitchens in the 13 colonies, making food flavorful, making food come alive, including that African influence and that native and that European to make, what we know of today, as some of us know, Southern food or soul food, however you want to coin it. But to honor those ancestors and to honor their existence and being and making it possible for all of us to be here today, especially myself and Twitty. So, it's an honor. And it's also an honor to come and taste the food, too. I wish y'all could be here to taste it. But it's good. It's great. And it's all worth the sweat and the heat. It's great.
Now, you mentioned that the food reflects the multiple cultures that were here in Virginia during the colonial period. So how does what you're making today reflect those multiple cultures?
So Brunswick stew and burgoo and South Carolina hash are all related dishes. Burgoo is from Kentucky, Brunswick stew, Virginia and Carolinas, and Georgia, hash from South Carolina. It's basically taking the little bits and pieces of the food that you have and putting it together to make something that can feed a mass amount of people. So here we have, for example, we have okra, which of course came from sub-Saharan Africa. We have bread in the dish, and breadcrumbs and bread, distinctly, Western European, Northern European. We have lima beans and tomatoes and corn coming from Central and South America, eventually being grown all over the Americas. So we have all these different elements put together, onions from Central Asia and the Mediterranean. This was not possible before this time period, at least in the case of Eastern North America. We also have sweet potatoes, which came through South America and Central America, through to Africa, and back across the Atlantic to the Chesapeake, and up from the West Indies to the Chesapeake. Sweet potatoes were once called Spanish potatoes. So like we call white potatoes Irish potatoes, even though neither one of them came from those places. So it's really a story of how, and this is not a kumbaya narrative. I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Everybody knows my work, knows that I'm not a kumbaya guy. But it's important to understand the routes and routes that our food took to get to our tables. And this is a particularly controversial dish. It's beloved in the Southeast. It's eaten with barbecue in North Carolina. Everybody has a different version of it. Some people say, how dare you put okra in that Brunswick stew? Some people say, oh yeah, you got to have it. Other people say, where's the squirrel? And so we're also talking about the way that people envision foods as being representative of them. For a long time, the narrative about Brunswick stew was like, Brunswick stew was invented by a black man who was the body servant of white folks on a hunt. And then someone said after Reconstruction, no, it was invented by a white man. That's very telling that narrative flipped from antebellum to postbellum. Also, we have cans of Brunswick stew. One of them, before civil rights, had a black man on it. After civil rights, had a white man on it. But we're also erasing Native American women, because who else would have put together corn, beans, squash, squirrel, any kind of game, and put it in a pot and cooked it all day in a clay pot, but women who were Powhatan, Monacan, Tutelo, Saponi, etc. So we really have to think about how each culture made its own little footprint on this dish, foodprint on this dish, and how these things come down to us today, people of all backgrounds. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned to me when we were talking about this yesterday that Brunswick stew is part of a sort of family of dishes that get made together traditionally. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Brunswick stew is part of a family of dishes that were made for celebration times. So typically, Brunswick stew fall to the spring. We're talking about a huge cauldron that would have cooked for hours upon hours. Someone who is an expert at making Brunswick stew for a mass crowd is called a stew master, in the same way you have a pit master. And those two terms go hand in hand because Brunswick stew and barbecue often travel together in terms of when people ate them. Like I said, in eastern North Carolina to this day, you're likely to get a cup of Brunswick stew along with your barbecue, because the barbecue there is not the same as the barbecue in the southern Midwest or central South. It's the whole pig barbecued for 18 hours, 12, 18 hours. It's dry. It's has a vinegary and peppery dip that you eat with it, but it's not quite the same as what you might expect in Kansas City or another place. So the Brunswick stew is there to also moisten the meat and get both give each other flavor along with the corn cakes. So when we talk about the hoe cakes, we talk about the ash cakes, talk about the Brunswick stew, the barbecue, the roasted sweet potatoes and the ashes, which we're going to show you in a minute. All of those things were part of a agrarian world, a tobacco-growing agrarian world, which, of course, Colonial Williamsburg talks about the center of that era, when the sweet-scented tobacco and Orinoco tobacco made the economy of one of the wealthiest colonies in what was then British North America. Of course, empowered and fueled by the work of enslaved Africans and African Virginians. So these foods have a story, they have a history, they have their controversies. We're not shying away from any of that. We just want to this is what we do. We do this laboratory work to work through and try to discover and learn more about why people tell the stories about themselves through the foods that we have available to us. Yeah.
So we do have some audience questions
Sure.
rolling in here, and Christian, who tunes in from Germany, says, as I understand it, in Europe's gentry courts, it was common for food to be cold when it arrived at the table. Was that common in Virginia?
Oh no! In fact, and it says in the Virginia Housewife, the first Southern cookbook, a lot of recipes have the annotation, send to the table hot. And that had a lot of pressure on these folks who were enslaved, who were doing the cooking and serving, because, today is a cold day here in Virginia. And this is southeastern Virginia, where it's usually much warmer in other places. But can you imagine, this is the dinner time, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock hour, because they're about to lose light. Can you imagine what it meant, the pressure it meant to put on all these courses and dishes to the table, and it's cold outside, and send them to the table warm. And so you can't see it on camera, but here's the kitchen, there's a hallway that leads to the house. So as quick as that food came off, it was sent there to be prepped, and then sent to table as hot as possible. So that was the thing. We'll put that in the main pot. It's got the parsley in it.
We'll put that meat on the...
Cool. So what we're doing right now is we're actually making we already made a pot of Brunswick stew. So the ingredients, I know y'all are like, where are the ingredients? Where's the recipe? We're gonna work on that. Just be patient. So those of you who are true Brunswick stew fans, I just want you to understand this is the prototype version. So we have the chicken that we boiled and started to pull off the bone. We have salt and pepper. Really not a whole lot to Brunswick stew. Salt, black pepper, and red pepper. We have, show them the lima beans, Harold, come on now. Send them big old beans. Big lima beans, butter beans. We got breadcrumbs, we got okra, we got tomatoes, we have corn, we have onions. That's it. Those of you and sugar, a little bit of sugar. There's not a ton of sugar in this, so those of you who are just rolling your eyes, going, those Southerners go again. They're either frying something, putting sugar all over it. Come on now, be nice. Oh, the forbidden meat. Okay, yes, so I just want to show everybody this. Let's just lift this up with my big hands. So we've roasted off a piece of pork and done it sort of like in the manner of the Chesapeake and also a little bit of the Caribbean, because the Caribbean, those of you who are of Caribbean heritage, you know that roast pork and roast meat this time of year is a big part of the Christmas dinner. But a lot of those influences were going back and forth because there were human beings and there were foods and ideas about food traveling between the Caribbean, the Low Country, the Chesapeake, and the Lower Mississippi Valley, depending upon where you were from. And if you are of Haitian background in particular, or Puerto Rican background, griot and pernil. Pernil. The roast pork is very important to the holiday festivities, and also in Jamaica as well. So we have all those heritages, but they were also part of the cultures here. It's very important to state that. Yeah. So no, Christian, I'm so sorry, but in Virginia to this day, Southern people, if food ain't hot when you give it to your guests, that's not, that ain't cool. No pun intended.
We have some great questions coming in from the audience. Someone I think is very familiar with your work, Linda, says, I would like to hear Michael discuss the role these foods play in his own identity. What do they mean to
You getting
him?
deep on me.
Yeah,
Thesis.
right. Yeah, right.
Thesis. Okay, no problem. Hi, Linda. I guess that Brunswick Stew is something I didn't grow up with. I became acquainted with it when I started learning about Southern food and its history. And it's interesting. You don't always, just like you don't keep every single artifact or every single gene in your pool, you don't keep every single recipe or idea about food. And that's because the generations change and the people change over time. And a lot of time it simply comes down to, we should rotate that chicken. Well, it comes down to what people's tastes are. And in our community, it's interesting. In our community, I'm black, I'm gay, I'm Jewish, I'm Southern, I'm completely mixed up, and happy about it, like the rest of y'all are. But no shade, no tea, right? I lost my microphone. That's the ancestors going. Hey, stick to the script. But really, it's like you do lose certain things, certain parts of the narrative. I bet you if I went back far enough in my own family and interviewed my ancestors, no time soon, thanks. These things will be present in their lives, in their stories. So the foods that came down to me, the red rice, the fried chicken, the barbecue, the pickled okra, all those great things, the collards, and even things we adopted as we moved and migrated across the country from our neighbors, all those are deeply part of me. And of course, in terms of Jewish life, my Hanukkah dinner is, beignets and matzo meal fried chicken and kreplach where they're filled with collard greens and sweet potatoes. Other things that I've made is my own unique way, but it's also the Moroccan and Ashkenazi foods that I've come into contact with. So it's just a matter of understanding. You have to be conscious about making that food a part of your story. What about you, Harold? What about what's your food lineage?
I'm sorry, I was still stuck on matzo fried chicken.
Oh yeah, it's good, bro.
What that tastes like?
Oh, you gonna find out? I'll make it
That's
for you
the
and
first time I
Jasmine.
heard about that. For me, my family lineage in terms of like pork, a lot of pork usage in my family, but also, for instance, us making the buns, the sausage buns, roasting chicken. These are all part of my lineage as well that I remember, from a young age, and then me learning, how to cook a lot of this food from my aunts and my uncles as well. My family, everybody cooks and they cook very well, and also to the native side also. That influence of my family in the foods that we're eating, especially with the corn and the grits and everything. So, it's all connected, and it's great to be able to have that connection to the food and remind you of where you come from, and that also reminds you that you're continuing the tradition by continuing to cook and do what we do today at the same time, honoring the people that came before us.
Eat this. Tell them what you think.
You
about it.
ain't got to tell me twice. Oh man.
So what does it taste like?
Man.
Have a food TV and tell people exactly what it tastes like.
Eat your finger off.
Well, that seems like a good time to ask our next audience question.
Yes,
While you're talking
please.
about your personal relationship to food, we have another regular viewer, Aaron, who wants to know, what is your favorite food?
You go first.
I like fried fish.
Fried fish.
Fried fish. That's right. Whiting. Yes, love fried fish, and I love groundnut soup or a peanut soup, African dish. I love that as well with some fufu. Oh man, can't beat it.
So what you all should know is that Harold and I have traveled to Africa together 3 times: Ghana, Benin, Togo,
Right.
and Senegal and Gambia.
Yep.
And in 2017, when I was here on a fellowship for a year, It was, I gotta tell you, one of the most bizarre but powerful experiences I ever had was going from Virginia, Colonial Williamsburg, to Senegal, back to Virginia, and doing the same thing in Nigeria that same year. And then I think after I came back from Nigeria, I told Harold, I said, we got to go to Africa. You got to come with us. He's like, I don't know. So we got him to Africa, to Ghana, and we've taken a group of black chefs. So this is our third trip together, taking black chefs from different backgrounds, African American, Caribbean, Afro-Latin, whatever, taking them to the continent to learn about the food traditions. And so when we were in Ghana, we had the opportunity to actually pound the fufu, which looked easy. It's not easy.
No.
Although we probably did it better than other folks who were on the trip. And we ate cutting grass cutter.
Yeah, grass cutter.
He ate the grass cutter. I did not eat the grass cutter. That's too tray for me. So, but you enjoyed the grass cutter. So I want you to understand that we have a lot of, our relationship with this food goes beyond just replicating the past, but learning about the precursor of this food in West Africa and learning about our own heritage. And that's been a major part of our journey. So the quick answer for me, what is my favorite food to eat? Lord, that's difficult. I'll give you my top 4. Scallion pancakes.
That's good.
Greens in various forms: Brazilian, Ethiopian, African American, Sierra Leonean. That's another big one for me. Fried chicken. Sorry, fried chicken beats fried fish any day of the week. Boom.
I don't know about that.
I know about that. And barbecue. I know there's a lot of protein in that list. I'm so sorry. But, that's how I be for the moment. So those are my top 4 favorites. But I promise you there's some vegetables in the bottom 5. Bottom six, sorry, I got to run a brain, of the top 10.
So you were mentioning traveling to different parts of Africa. Shelley had a question. She's interested to know if in Africa fermented food was eaten.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and this is a big, and I without trying to be a scientist, we should probably take the chicken off.
Yeah.
And we can cut it, so wrestle and cut. Without being a non-scientist about this, I think fermented food is the key to why there are certain disparities. A lot of people look at the not traditional, but the celebratory Southern diet. Let's make that distinction. And by celebratory, I mean the foods that people would have eaten at special occasions have become symbolic of the corpus of Southern food, and that's really not the way it works in any cuisine. But because that food has been appropriated by chain restaurants and fast food, that's what people think of as being Southern food, when really Southern food was a lot of beans, a lot of roasted potatoes, a lot of fresh vegetables from the garden, fresh fish and seafood. Seldom would you eat your domestic animals, more fresh game, which it's actually good for you. But the other part of it is that in Africa, there are a lot of fermented foods, a lot of carbohydrates. But there's not the same rates of certain chronic illnesses that we see over here. And I think the reason is because you eat so much fermented cornmeal, the banku, the kenke in Ghana, fermented, the fufu. All those things are like probiotics in the diet. And people don't eat this, not the Western diet. People don't eat as much meat over there. They eat a lot more vegetables and greens and legumes like black-eyed peas. So it's really critical to understand that distinction. And that, fermented foods took time. And as we are interpreting enslavement and the time period, quite frankly, enslaved African Virginians were not given the time to adequately, make those foods. And so they lost some of those traditions, which in many ways helped a lot of people survive on the continent. Thank you for that question. It's really important.
We have a lot of great questions here, so let's go ahead and take it back and ask some historical questions. Megan has a really interesting one here. With what was available in the region as far as ingredients at the time, how would the American Indian and the black men and women preserve the rights and traditions to the recipes that they created?
Okay, so one of the problems that we have, unfortunately, is that we're talking about pre-literate societies. It's not until the 1820s that a lot of these things in the South in particular are written down. And they're not written down by black and brown people. It's a very complicated thing we're dealing with in this history. The problem is that for us, after generations, there was a certain amount of literary appropriation of these dishes. And I think a big deal for me and for Harold and for other folks who do black culinary history and also native culinary history and practice is trying to get people to understand the food may have similar forms, but does it have a similar meaning? Does it have a similar import? Several people, I'm also Jewish. People, if you have an egg bread and you're Russian and it's Easter time, that's koilage. But if you have that same egg bread and it's every Friday night, it's challah. There are two very different narratives that go along with a very similar product that may or may not have the same ingredients. So we have to be willing to actually take those foods and those narratives and those stories and break them down with respect to the group creating them and be willing and open, as Harold said, to listen to the narrative behind it and not assume and not make any assumptions about anything, but willing to hear each other out about how a similar dish with the same dish can have different import, but also give credit where credit is due. And I think that's important because not giving credit to enslaved Africans and African folk for generations was a hallmark of white supremacy and racism. But to give that credit back is to repair and restore and give healing to us all, because now we can say this is part of our heritage and that we are part of that same African family and native family.
That's right.
No worries.
And I am so glad you got into that question of giving credit. We actually had a direct question from the audience about that as well, from Jessica, who asked how enslaved and free people of African descent influenced the ingredients that went into popular holiday dishes during the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The sweet potatoes that we all enjoy. Oh, we should get sweet potatoes out. Show the video. Yeah, man. Look while them chickens rest.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sweet potatoes. The candied sweet potatoes that we enjoy. One reference that I have that is from that time period talks about how enslaved people in the Caribbean would take sweet potatoes with them to the sugar mill, and as the sugar was boiling, use some of that really hot liquid to cook the sweet potatoes. That could be one of many routes to candied sweet potatoes, but think about what that narrative says. That's not fake lore, that's not food lore, that's somebody witnessing this and understanding how those dishes came to be. So it's something. Like black-eyed peas, collard greens, period. Collards were actually Eurasian, but replaced some of the myriad of greens that you would find in West Africa. But also they were brought to Africa during the slave trade. So you have all these different narratives competing, but the okra, the watermelon, the muskmelon, other legumes, the use of tomatoes, peanuts, and sweet potatoes in the South is directly traceable to the African presence. So we have, and of course, barbecue, the hot peppers. The list goes on and on and on. Read The Cooking Gene, shameless plug, James Britt award-winning book, if you want to find out more about that and how those operate in black families. Thank you very much, Stacy.
Is now a good moment to talk a little bit about where we are and what we're cooking today?
Harold, give it up. Talk to him.
Yeah, so we roasted these sweet potatoes in the ash. You would have found that something common for Native people to do.
Absolutely.
African people, most certainly. And
Europeans,
Europeans also.
Yeah.
This has been something that, particularly if people were out in the fields working, this would allow them to have these sweet potatoes cooking while they could be out in the fields and not have to worry about that. Being that the ash, which is hot but not excessively hot to burn the sweet potatoes, and they were roast for a number of hours from the hot ash, and that's what we did there with those with the 4 sweet potatoes. And we're gonna pull those out from the ash.
We're about to do some very serious, gratuitous 18th century food, you know what. So y'all just wait. We're gonna cut these babies open. We're gonna show you this chicken. We're gonna make you hungry.
While we're in the process of doing that, we do have plenty more audience questions, and some of it Some of them are related to what you were just talking about. Corinne wants to know what connections are there between barbecue and Africa, and are there any resources that come to mind to learn more about that topic?
So here's the deal. A lot of barbecue historians have simply gone back to the terminology from the West Indies. You're about to hear me give a little something. You can't tell the story of barbecue without Native people or Africans. It's just not going to happen. And, it's funny because when we were in Benin in particular, do you remember when we went to that spot and it was like they were barbecuing the pork and the chickens and everything? And with the mop and everything.
Right.
It could have been in, the deep south.
That's right, Carolina.
Not that long again. It was that deep. But also in Senegal, we had dibi.
Right, the dibi.
The roast lamb with the spices and everything over a wood fire and a grill. And the hole in the ground. We've seen that in Africa. So we've seen all these proto-traditions of barbecue. Let us do this. Let's do this. Our table's nice and clean, y'all. We're going to do this. We'll dump this out. We're going to wipe it out with paper towels, and we're going to cut it open. These are really hot potatoes. My hands, these are cook's hands. You see me doing this whole juggling thing. It's all fun and good, but this is really hot. And don't worry, CW, I will not burn my hands on your watch. But I'm used to this. We're kind of wiping the potato off. Our hands are clean, by the way. All you sisters watching, are their hands clean? I know. That's how we be in our culture. But we're going to open these up for you. I'm going to bring them close to the camera so you can see. I'm just doing this little part right here. But barbecue for me in particular tells a story of resistance. Who is barbecuing in the West Indies? It's the Maroons, people who are running away from slavery. How did the revolt against slavery begin? Well, Gabriel Prosser's revolt began with a fish fry and a barbecue. The Haitian rebellion began with a roasting of a pig. So did Nat Turner's rebellion. See what I'm saying? This is a part about gathering, about trying to understand. It was a way of gathering together to make plans to liberate ourselves. Jerk chicken, which you're familiar with in the Caribbean, that's the Maroons. That's in the woods. That's a roast hog. And why would you think about the jerk chicken and the jerk hog and everything? Because they were cooked in a certain way as to not give away the presence of the Maroon camp. Low and slow cooking. Native and African ways put together. So please feel free to read some of my stuff. I've done lots of on this. And others as well. Adrian Miller has a book about barbecue coming out.
We should get that to the front so we can
let's put
that butter in that molasses.
Give me this. Oh, that's right. We're going to do the yes. Oh, yeah. So give me some of that butter.
There's some.
Yeah, we got that right here. And here you go.
Right here.
Yes, sir. So you look how this is Harold's skillful roasting in ashes. This is not easy to do. If you think it's easy, try it yourself. But we got these two beautiful sweet potatoes. You can pull some of that off. And you know what we're going to do? What was a little
put
spoon?
it right on the front.
Give a little drizzle.
Yeah, that's what.
All on top. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And this is very new world because we're talking about, here you go. We're talking about molasses, which is a product of Caribbean sugar plantations in Louisiana as well. We're talking about the sweet potato, which is native, but being adopted by Africans in the New World. And we're talking about the European butter.
Yes, right.
All three pieces of the story put together a little bit. Now we need to find us a little spoon and put a little molasses on it so they can see it just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. There you go. Improvise. Like our forefathers and foremothers. Improvise. We're putting molasses on there right now, y'all, which was more common back then than white sugar.
Yeah.
White sugar was expensive, but molasses and cane syrup.
Yeah, y'all need to get close to this.
Yeah.
So y'all can see.
He means y'all.
Actually, you know what? Let me just go ahead and get that close to see where we at. There we go.
There we go.
All right. Boy, you eat your finger off. I can't. I don't know.
That's how my grandfather used
What
to.
y'all think? This look good, and it is good. Oh my God. So this is eating right here. If y'all don't know, y'all better ask somebody.
All right, so we do have a lot of audience questions
Come
rolling
on, bring
in.
it.
And I wish they were about sweet potatoes.
That's right.
But while we're still kind of on the topic of barbecue, Bob has asked, what is the most important thing I should tell my college students about the history of barbecue? You just gave us a lot, but
wow.
what's the number one thing you'd like college students to know about the history of barbecue?
That it didn't begin with the Bubbas, it began with the brothers. There you go. You want a slant? You want a snappy slogan? I see you, Obama. You want a snappy slogan? That's it. And I don't mean, I'm really not trying to erase or remove white Southerners from this narrative. I'm simply trying to say that it is a collective heritage.
Right.
And because we for so long have been denied our representation. So in other words, it was cool for everybody when we were just simply the background. When there was an assumption of subservience
And when there's one the money
and
involved.
inferiority. But when it was us on our own terms, all of a sudden it became, it became another thing. And it's really, in today's barbecue competitions, it's not so easy for us to participate. There's insurance liabilities and other borders to the folks who do this well. A lot of us are still on the side of the street in the South, on the roads, the country roads, doing our barbecue that way. You don't see us on TV talking about dry rubs and injections and all that nonsense. We didn't need all that.
Right.
That's not our way. You go to Africa, ain't nobody talking about injecting the meat and taking. Oh, and by the way, people who do barbecue, can I just get a moment with you? Every single of these things with ribs and other things begins with take the silver skin off. We don't do that. You know why? Because Harold, you tell them we like that little bit of skin on that meat. In Africa, that's a delicacy.
Right.
Shit, I'm telling you. So it really does come down to having a bigger conversation. And I think there's room for everybody in a big tent for everybody, but that we also have to look at these roots. For those of us who are doing this isn't natural and normal. We were never supposed to find out where we came from. We were never supposed to connect to our ancestors. We were supposed to be cut off forever. And the fact that we go back to the continent and we make these links and we get welcome back. First thing Harold can tell you when we get off the plane in Africa, the first words we hear are welcome home.
Yep.
And that is so powerful and important for us. And it's a part of our food narrative as well, just like it is for everybody else. The most important thing we can tell you about barbecue is that there is a whole black history of barbecue that has never been told.
Right.
That we need to learn and interview people and practice that.
And native too. I mean,
and native too, yes.
They got pictures
Yes.
of native people roasting meat.
Native
on,
people still roasting meat.
Sapling grills. So
That's right.
That's right. So I think that's like Twitty said, I think that's an important thing to also convey to your students is that to include that African and native influence when we're talking about barbecue and the origin of it too.
So this leads really well into the next audience question about another food that people eat differently, and we can all have a little controversy about how to eat this food.
Yes.
But Tanya asks, how do you do grits? For us Iroquois, we make white corn mush. I add blueberries, dried or fresh, and maple sugar, not syrup, and bacon. But how do you do grits?
Oh, dang. I kind of want them Iroquois grits. Don't
That's
I?
goodness.
Oh, wow. Sugar or not sugar?
I was raised with a little bit of sugar. Okay. Yeah, people look at me, but that's how I was raised. My mother was born here in Virginia. I don't know if that was a child thing she was trying to get us to eat, but so that's how I eat it, with a little bit of sugar. Some people will balk at that, a lot of Southerners, but that's how I was raised to eat it. I still eat it. It's always white corn, never yellow, always white. Now, we do have documentation of native people in Virginia eating hoe cakes. It's kind of like your hush puppy, but made in a fritter or a cake. And oftentimes make it just regular, just the cornmeal and water, but also putting fruit in it. So I've heard of hoe cakes with fruit in them. So again, using that again, that cross-pollination of the European having an influence on the native too, and the native using those European foodstuffs also to also including that into their traditional diet. And I think that's up for debate too, because I think there's a movement going on about returning back to the traditional native ways before European contact, and that's great. I think that's a debate. Is foreign influence, is it a bad thing when you're looking at traditional foodstuffs? I think that's a debate that we all need to have, because if you think about Italy, what would Italy be now without tomatoes?
Right.
That come from the Americas, you know what I'm saying? Or corn, for that matter, when we talk about polenta, corn being from Native America. So I think that's something that's really up to debate, that we really need to debate to really expand and talk about, is it a good or bad thing, the pro and cons of, including those foreign foodstuffs in the traditional diet if we're talking about, in particular, native food.
And so we had a couple of questions about rice. Doug asks, could you speak to the role of rice in both Southern cuisine and the economy? And then Anna wants to know about if you have a book coming out on rice?
Yes, I have a book coming out on rice through UNC Press, University of North Carolina Press, a part of their Savor the South series, which is in single ingredient cookbooks about Southern cuisine. So rice was grown across the Southeast, but most importantly in South Carolina and Georgia and part of North Carolina. Rice was even grown on the James River in Virginia. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Every time rice is mentioned in those early texts, so are enslaved Africans.
Right.
And that's the same for Brazil, Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and onward. Rice was coming from Africa to America, both Ariza sativa, which is Asian rice. So in other words, we say Asian rice, but what we forget is that these foods go to the continent, they're there for decades or hundreds of years, and then they come to the Americas. The same way that Ariza glaberrima, which is African, one form of African rice, there are others, comes to the Americas after thousands of years of being cultivated in West Africa. So rice is called the queen. That's why we call it cotton king, and tobacco was the king. Rice was called the queen. And rice made fortunes for enslavers, slaveholders on the southeastern coast. Fortunes. But it's also this key ingredient in especially low country and lower Mississippi Valley cuisine, especially in Louisiana. And it's versatile. It's puddings and fritters. It's also the staple with which okra soup and peanut soup and etouffee. It's the basis of jambalaya and hoppin' john. So there's this entire cuisine based on rice. Rice cooked a certain way. Every grain is separate and distinct, as opposed to mushy and composite. And so that's a hallmark of African rice dishes. And we haven't even begun to talk about peas and rice and peas, and beans and rice. And people often say, well, those are what happened. The Caribbean came to America. No, they're actually the flow of people and ideas across the Americas using a very similar ingredient and using the complex of particularly field peas and rice. So that's what we have there. Oh, this chicken. Lord, if you don't show them that chicken. Here, I'm going to get up and move this pot so you can put that in the forefront. We don't care about them lima beans.
Yeah, excuse the people.
Father God. Wow. That boy is on fire. Yes, sir. So if you're asking about you didn't ask about the chicken, I'm going to tell you about the chicken anyway. The chicken is based. It's interesting how like European and African foodways have a very similar approach. You rub the chicken with oil. In West Africa, could be palm oil. Could be
with that mustard.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like yassa.
Yassa.
It's the same thing. You rub it with the oil, you grill it, and you eat it. Right. Now this looks very, very British the way we're doing it, and there's that too. But in this case, there's there's some garlic, there's some onion, there's some hot red peppers, there's pepper, there's salt, there's herbs, all ingredients which would have been in Virginia and in West Africa at the same time. But, Costco ain't got nothing on us. So check it out. Sorry, Costco. We love you, but this is our hearth-fired chicken. I mean, come on now.
So we have several questions about today that I'd like to get to, but we've got a great question to kind of bridge to that. This is from a different Stacy, not me. How often do you incorporate the historical recipes that you have learned into your menus at home?
A lot.
Oh, all the time.
What do you do?
I do pretty much everything. I like making sweet potato buns. I'll do the sweet potatoes like what you all see here. I'll bake them, put molasses, butter in it, a little bit of brown sugar. Roast the pork. Make rice or jollof rice, which is a red rice, especially if you're down in South Carolina. You know about that red rice, and that's a direct descendant from the jollof rice. If you're up in West Africa, that red rice made with that tomato and onion base. So yeah, I pretty much remake a lot of what we do here today and what I've done in my everyday cooking. Absolutely, it's great. It's great food.
Now, quickly, I want to talk about the Brunswick Stew. Again, typically made with squirrel and small game. But we have okra and white sweet potatoes. By the way, in colonial America, particularly in the South, white sweet potatoes and sweet potatoes, period, yellow, what have you, would have been much more eaten than the white potato. So those of you who are freaking out because of the choice I've made, these are not especially sweet. They're more starchy. We have lima beans, we have tomatoes, we have okra, we have salt, pepper, we have chicken, we have red hot pepper, and that's pretty much it. This is not as red as most Brunswick stews usually look. But remember, tomatoes were not as popular among European Americans in the Anglo world at that time. But for Africans, French folks, Spanish folks, and native folk, tomatoes were especially enjoyed. But that's our proto-Brunswick stew. It's very soft. We could probably cook it for another 2-3 hours to complete baby food. But we're trying to make sure that we show you this. This is our signature dish of the day, showing these multiple cultural influences. And we're going to go ahead and move this down so you can see everything. Our West Indian / Chesapeake inspired roast pork on there as well. Yeah.
That's not bad.
Not bad at all.
That's not bad looking.
What else we got, Stacy?
Well, Lori has asked, how could you replicate something like the slow roasting of the sweet potatoes in a home oven if you don't have a fire?
Pretty easy.
Yeah, it's easy. I'd say you just put it in the oven at 370. 375. Yeah. Let it cook. Pretty much you bake it until it's soft. I'd say time. It really depends on the oven, but you just pretty much bake it until it's soft. Take it out. I mean, you'll know when you touch it if it's still a little hard and firm. Put it back in until it's completely soft. Take it out. Open it up. Best time to eat that is when it just comes out of the oven. Open it up. Put that however you like it. Butter, molasses, a little bit of brown sugar, and tear it up.
Yep. Maybe a little cinnamon, allspice if you really want to go that far. If you make it that far.
Yeah. Nutmeg even.
Even.
All right. So speaking of the differences, I think our next viewer understands that the hour that they're tuning into today is not does not include all the work that went into this. So Anitra asks, how long did it take to cook this meal, including important prep like building fires?
Oh, we've been around here since 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so 7-8 hours. I mean, we've been about 7 hours.
But if you were if we were doing this, and to replicate the time in real time for an 18th century meal served at 2 o'clock, because remember, in 2.5 hours, you start to lose a serious amount of light. It's not like on TV and movies where there's like 1,000 candles. Candles were expensive. Okay, candles had to be handmade and homemade. That's a lot of work, dangerous work. So if you could, and most people didn't have mirrors. I did not understand this until I started doing this work. I was like, why are there so many mirrors in these rich people's houses? Then I realized they reflect the light. And there's no other light than fire and natural light. So to understand that means that someone was up at 6 Before the sun came up, getting things ready. The dinner was started. They started preparations at 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Day before, actually.
Or even the day before for cakes that would be soaked in liquor, for slaughtering certain animals. If it was cold, you could let the meat stay out. I mean, you remember, this chickens, you don't just buy a plucked chicken. You go to the market, you buy a live chicken, or you go to the butcher. It's more money. That's expensive. That's not cheap. Even to have somebody else do that work for you. So only a privileged few did that. And by the way, only a privileged few even ate the chicken in the first place. So it's so critical to understand that. The average cook's day would have been, okay, so we're talking about breakfast. As soon as the sun came up, then you had to clean the dishes, get everything squared away. And breakfast was usually like the leftovers, heated up, and fresh bread, fresh cornbread.
Leftover Virginia ham.
Right.
Yeah, chocolate drink, coffee, tea. Yeah, just leftovers. They didn't
Hominy
really have
grits.
breakfast food. Yeah, they didn't really have breakfast food per se. And then that preparation, as soon as that breakfast went out, start immediately into the dinner, and that's gonna transcend from the night before into the next day, depending on what they're eating. It might have been something that needed to be prepared the night before, go into the day. So you're talking about long lengths of time of preparation to make that dinner, especially if you're talking about 2 to 3 courses, 5 to 7, 5 to 10 dishes, at a sitting. You're talking about a long length of time.
And making sure that you have the vegetables from the garden, things from the market, And that's an urban household. That's not a rural household. There are distinct differences in how people do that. So yeah, this would have been a overnight or 8-hour or at least 6-hour process to make sure the food was sent to table hot at 2 o'clock. And there were some dishes where you could kind of get away with, you might have a half an hour, an hour more to get them to the second flow. But for the most part, everything had to be a done deal by the time that 2 o'clock dinner bell was rung.
Yeah, so you're talking about a small army of people, and just like a small army of us today that helped us out. We couldn't have did it with the crew here, Ms. Janice, Mr. Robert, all the folks that interpret here at the Randolph House helping us out.
Miss Jenny running back and forth.
I mean, really, it took a small army to get the wood ready and the pots clean. So we were really appreciative, and it took this small army here to do it today. So during the colonial period,
imagine.
Yeah, it would have been quite a few people, children too, involved in making sure that breakfast prep, dinner prep, supper prep.
Just having the kids run the water back and forth and get the wood.
And the wood, right.
None of that. No turning on of things or running a faucet.
Right.
So that's the way it was up until, the 1920s and 1930s in most of the rural South. So important. We should get a knife and cut part of the breast of that chicken.
You want to hurt him some more?
Huh? I'm gonna hurt him some more.
Oh, boy.
So while you're doing that, we've got some great audience questions I want to make sure we get to, because they're about what you do today, along with those folks that you just mentioned that have been helping us out today. Jordan wants to know, my question is, how would a young black cook get involved with living history? What tips do you have for becoming a living historian?
That's a good question.
Get a strong stomach for people's attitudes.
That's right.
You can't make anybody happy.
That's right.
You're not going to make. That's the first thing and foremost thing, is to have a fortitude of spirit and will, because this work is. Most people are pretty cool, but the people who are uncool will make you think twice about what you're doing. But there's so many parts of our history and time periods. We're starting to get to the point where the Civil Rights Movement was 60 years ago. So for someone to talk about Georgia Gilmore, who helped fund the Civil Rights Movement with her cooking, that's extraordinary. Or for someone to talk about how the Black Panthers influenced food is extraordinary. So it's not just this time period. The other time periods, through different mediums and media and forms of art, you can interpret. But in this particular, it's worth it because you're learning about the ingredients. And so I think it's important to just read as much as you can. It's important to experiment. It's important to try to replicate some of these foods at home. Also volunteer with a local living history museum. It's important to sort of think in terms of the seasons and lack, as well as what you have. It's just, there's so much. I mean, we've both been interested in this since we were very young. But we encourage. We don't want to be the only people doing this.
Right.
We want the future to be in good hands. So come on, be part of all this work.
Yeah, I say get up under somebody who has experience, who's worked at museums.
We've had Robert and other folks who are great mentors to us.
Yeah, Miss Janice here.
Yes.
Supervisor Randolph House. So many people that has helped us out and looked after us and mentored us. So it's important to get up under those cooks that have been at museums, who have that experience to really get your foot in the door. Volunteer, like Twitty said, that would be a good start, just so you can get an idea of what you're going to be up against. And if you don't have a thick skin, if you hang on it, you're going to get it, because of what you're going to be dealing with, and the information that you're putting forth is not something that's widely known or widely accepted. And you got to stand in that truth and your righteousness. And if you know what you're saying is truth and righteousness and righteous, you'll be all right. And that's going to push you forward and compel you to continue to do that work even when it gets tough.
That's right.
Yep.
So I'm glad you mentioned how tough that can be. We did have an audience member, Rebecca, ask specifically if it's difficult to take on the role of an enslaved person.
Well, we don't really take on the role of an enslaved person so much as we take on the role as being a teacher and interpreter for their experience, and even that is tough. And it's tough because there are some people who want to tell the story of enslavement as something casual, as not that bad. And then there are other folks who want to say, every single day was a disaster. And if every single day was a disaster, we wouldn't be here. Because people loved, they had children, they had families. And of course, part of the story of enslavement is the breaking up of those families. That's right. The destruction of those legacies. But then the constant resistance against slavery. Nobody freed us, we freed ourselves. We fought, we're Robert Smalls, who commandeered a Confederate vessel and brought it to the Union side. We are Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. We are Frederick Douglass, the 19th century's most photographed and celebrated man, born in enslavement in Maryland. That's right. We are all these people, small. We're a woman in Alexandria who bought her husband's freedom by selling tomatoes from her garden. We are entrepreneurs. We are butlers and serving men in New York who formed a phalanx against slave catchers to protect a fugitive enslaved man who sought his own freedom. So, it's hard. It's hard when you have folks who only have one narrative on the negative and only have one negative on the other narrative on the other side as well. It's very hard to deal with that. I'm just trying to make people understand that enslavement was colloquial and discretionary, which meant that we can't tell you how everybody had it, right? Because there were 1,000,001 narratives. And trust and believe and understand that we understand that there was no happy-go-lucky slavery, that you were still held in bondage. You didn't have control over your life, your body, your property, or the fate of your children, your wife, your husband, your spouse, whatever. We understand that. But we also understand that we come from strong resistors. We come from strong patriots. We come from strong holders of African tradition.
That's sure.
And that's why we do what we do.
Well, and I think that leads us very well into our last question for today, which comes from Richard. And I think you know which Richard when I ask this question.
We see you, Josie.
Richard asks, what kind of ancestor will you be?
Oh.
You got that?
What kind of ancestor will I be? I'd be the guiding ancestor.
I wouldn't let nobody chicken burn.
Some
of y'all need the ancestor right now.
Yeah, right. The ancestor who would let those know that I am there and I am helping them along and that they are not alone.
That's it.
Helping them through, looking after them, watching over them. That's what kind of ancestor I want to be, because I believe that my ancestors are looking over me and looking
right.
over us in the same fashion. They're all around us every day. I feel them, I hear them, I see them, and I feel them in my soul. And that's a connection that I can't completely explain, but I know that they're there. So for me, it's doing the same job that they did for me, on this earth. So when I cross over, that's what I'm going to do.
Inshallah, no time soon.
Right.
We've one of the most profound experiences that we had was visiting Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, and it was because you could feel the energy. The energy. It wasn't anything anyone said. It was like a wall.
Yeah.
And I never had that experience anywhere on this planet.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was absolutely transformative.
Yeah.
And I think that the ancestors that we want to be, and I think another question is the elders we want to be. Because the ancestors, we had no control over that.
Yeah, right.
The elder was so we do with our good character and our morals and our values. Yeah. But an eldership, giving people a chance. The reason why I'm here is because people gave me a chance. And Harold gave me a chance. Miss Janice gave me a chance. Wesley Green used to be the landscape garden here, was so supportive. Peter Hatch from Monticello. All these people who did Robert Watson. Robert Watson took one look at me and said, "Okay, come here. Let's talk." And the funny thing is that I remember seeing. Well, I didn't know it was him, but part of the reason why I wanted to do living history because I saw this picture of this handsome young black man making candles in a book, and I said, "I don't know how, but I want to be that guy." And I did not know that guy was Robert Watson. Dallin Pritchard, another person, great mentor. Richard, another great Hi Richard. We love you, but we consider you an elder, even though you're a young cat. We have so many people, white, black, brown, native, other, who have shepherded us into this and said, "I'm going to give you a chance." And not everybody gets a chance. Not everybody says, "You can do this work," or "Let me give you this book," or "Let me show you how to make this." That's what keeps us going. So we want to perpetuate that compassion, that empathy, that giving, that generosity, because that's the only thing that we really have when it comes down to it. Yeah. I shall.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that is all the time we have today. We could talk for hours.
We could also eat for hours.
Yeah, really, yeah.
But we are so grateful to you, Michael, and to you, Harold, for cooking and for talking with us today. And I just want to again thank Mr. Robert Watson, who came in and built the fire this morning, and Miss Janice, who is the manager here at the Randolph site, and Miss Jenny, who was running food back and forth to the other kitchen. And everybody from sites who helped us today. Also everyone from our Historic Trades Department who helped us out today. I want to remind you that you can come see Harold as a part of our Historic Trades Department over in the Carpenter's Yard. We are open, so you can come and see us, and we'd love to have you join our Historic Foodways staff here as well. Last but not least, I would like to say a special thank you to our donors. This program and others like it would be impossible without your generous support. We are so glad that you could join us for this conversation, and we hope very much that you'll visit us at Colonial Williamsburg in person very soon. Thank you, and have a great day.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Woo.